Dad's field seemed like a fitting place to be to talk about my dad. You can see that today is a beautiful sunny day. On a day like this, it's almost 8 o'clock in the morning. Dad would have been up already for about 2 hours at least, getting ready for the day. Because it's the middle of summer, he'd probably be trying to figure out whether he could mow today or rake today and let the hay dry. Once that was done, he'd probably be off for a horseback ride or maybe off to the hog's trough for a swim. I know that when we were haying with him, he tried to make haying a little bit more fun because haying is not fun at all. So he'd take us out afterwards. If it were fall right now, he'd be out plowing a field somewhere near you with his 2 blonde horses, push and shove. If it were winter, the dogs would be out, hooked up, ready to go. Maybe we'd go for a ride up the pole line just next to my parents' property. And if it were the spring, well, if it were a nice day like this, he'd be out plowing again. Maybe it'd be one of the plow days that he and John Burns put on. It was always a running joke in our house. People would call for my dad. Is Pat there? Well, we'd be polite and say just a minute and we would check. And the routine was that we would check out the front window to see if there were any vehicles missing or if there were any horse tracks going down the driveway. Then we'd go and look out a back window and see how many dogs were still there. Were there any missing? Were there any horses missing? Then we'd look out the side window towards this field to see if he was out doing anything. Then we'd dutifully go back to the phone and say, well, no, unfortunately, Pat is not here. But it was a running joke in our family because, you know, if the sun was up, Dad wasn't home. He was out doing something and he was busy. So I'll always remember that. I can also remember a time that his granddaughters, Kayla and Zoe, had a friend down here. I don't remember what grade they were in, maybe grade 5 or 6. And as usual, Dad had a million things for them to do in a day. And by the time the weekend was over, the friend said to Kayla and Zoe, "Wow, you were telling the truth. You do all these things. I thought you guys were lying about your grandfather." Nope. He really did do those things. Last year, everything changed when he discovered he had liver cancer. And I decided to write a blog at that time for my daughter Brea and my son Liam, who won't be able to get to know my dad like everybody else. But I'd like to share a few stories from that blog. The first one is about climbing a fire tower in Boulder Township. Boulder was a place that we always went riding, maybe for just the day, or maybe we'd go in the summer and camp for a week or 2 and we'd go riding all day. Well, this day we rode to one of those old-fashioned fire towers that was used to, people would be up in the tower and they would be able to look out and see where a fire was and triangulate that with another fire tower to be able to send help. Tanya and I were, I don't know how old we were, but we were in public school, so we weren't that old. Well, we got to the tower and Dad said, well, this is what we're climbing up today. It was a big metal structure and it had a ladder that went up it, and at each rung there was a metal rung that went around and you climbed up through these metal rungs. So we started going up and Dad came behind us thinking that if we fell, at least we would fall on him. That was his safety measure. So up we went, and as we went above the tree line, I can remember the whole tower just swaying in the wind. We finally made it to the top where you have to climb through a hole in the wooden structure that's at the top of the fire tower. We got to the top and, you know, no windows are there anymore. It's just open and you can look out. and admire the view from there. Then we returned down the hole, climbed back down, everything went well. We found an old sign that must have been on the fire tower at one time, and it had fallen. And it indicated that up to the floor of the fire tower was 90 feet. I'm pretty sure that it was years and years before we told my mom that story. And when we did, and I'm pretty sure I was at least in my late teens, my mom said, "Oh, well, I just always assumed you were safe with your father." Anyway, I'm here today, and so obviously we were safe. Another story is about something called the Slide 5. My dad coached junior girls basketball, and he was convinced that at that level, everybody should be given an opportunity to play. So he took on more girls on his team than most coaches did. He took on 15. He made his 3 lines of 5. And the idea was, it was a slide 5. You had the same amount of time as everybody else on the team. 1 line went on, played their time, slide down the bench, next 5 on. A lot of people criticized him for that. They always said, "Well, don't you want to win, Pat?" Surprisingly enough, though, with that slide 5 method, I think Dad went to NDA almost every year and placed well. And besides, the opportunities that he gave those girls, I'm sure a lot of them remember, even today. I wrote another blog post called Dog Sledding at Night. Now there's a challenge. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures from that night, but I'll do my best to make you feel like you were there. This night, there was a bright full moon, so you could see right up the pole line. It was open, it was almost as bright as day, and Dad thought, you know, let's hook up the dogs and go for a run. The dogs were so excited and just bursting with energy. I don't remember for sure, but I think I took about 5 dogs. That's usually what I took. Dad took 6 because he was ahead of me, and off we went. When our teams were harnessed and eagerly awaiting the command, I perched on the back of my sled, ready to release the rope that tied the sled to the tree. Without this tether, my dogs would have been long gone without me. Dad turned around to give me a final look, making sure I was ready. Once he gave the command to his team, there'd be nothing to stop them. I nodded that I was ready. I released the rope and kept all my attention on holding down the foot brake. With our breath visible in the night air, Dad yelled, "Hike!" Both teams shot forward down the narrow trail that led to the small field next to our house. Once in the field, we were able to get to more of a standing position on our sleds, but as we approached the dip between our property and the property where the old schoolhouse is, we bent lower again to absorb the bounce and then to prepare for a hairpin turn immediately ahead and around a very large pine tree. A second hairpin corner completed our slalom and took us into a larger field where we could stand up and enjoy the scenery and maybe even congratulate ourselves for making it around the crazy turns. From this field we swung left and headed up the pole line, and the pole line is just that, a large swath of land cleared for the hydro lines to go from one concession road to another. I'd ridden this trail hundreds of times on Flyer and knew every turn, dip, and beaver pond. It turns out that this intimate knowledge comes in handy when you're flying down a trail at night. It's a little like proceeding by braille. Ah, there's that bump, so this turn is coming. I would have been off the sled in minutes had I not known exactly what was coming. The night was so bright that the shadows played havoc with our perception. Okay, maybe I shouldn't speak for my dad, but I know it played havoc with mine. Despite this, I don't think either of us missed a beat, possibly also owing to the fact that the dogs knew the trail as well as we did. The crisp air, the moonlight, the peacefulness, the slooshing of the sleds. Other than that, it was just me and Dad. I remember remember telling myself to take it all in because it was clear and that this was a special night. When we returned, we unharnessed the dogs and gave them some well-deserved hugs and pats. After we had picked up all the dog sledding equipment and were about to go back into the house, I turned to Dad to tell him that I consider this night to be my birthday gift for him. From him, that's how I kicked off my 31st year. Pretty special. I'm going to miss my dad so much. In his final months, I was able to tell him how much I loved him and what he meant to me. I also shared with him that my daughter Brea and I had decided that every time we looked at the moon, we'd think of him. So he knows that. But before you think that his final months were all somber, you should know that Dad's sense of humor did not fade. So here's one last little story. Mom, Dad, and I went to Paul's funeral home to make funeral arrangements. There we were sitting on the couch with Richard across from us. I was trying to get some details about cremation, what was the process. It was me and Mom and then Dad. Richard was explaining to us how you could expedite the process. And without missing a beat, Dad slowly turns to Mom and says, "Well, don't do it too early." Mom just didn't really notice and kept talking, and I could not help but burst out laughing. Dad started laughing, and then finally Mom just, "Oh, you too! Would you just stop?" But Dad was always poking fun right to the end, so we had a lot of good laughs. My cousin Kelly sent me a really nice message that I'd like to leave you with. You and your dad are like peas and carrots, just meant to be together. Luckily, he seems to have given you much of his magic for your family. And I really hope so, Kelly, I really hope so. So goodbye, Dad. I love you so much.